welcome into episode 2 officially of the Next Shift podcast. I am your host, Chris Nozick, joined by my co-host, Kenny Kaminsky. Kenny, how pumped are you for episode 2 here?
I'm so pumped that I did not sleep at all last night. Like I was just telling you, I think I got like an hour and a half of sleep total. You were like, we're going to have this guest on. I'll let you introduce him. I'm like, oh, there's no way I could go to bed now. I got to think of questions. I got to be sharp. But now I'm foggy because I didn't sleep at all. So that's where we're at.
Well, last week we covered a lot of some of the stuff that we're looking forward to in the NCAA season, and we'll continue that discussion as well. But in order to bring some of the Canadian juniors angle, and I wanted to bring in someone who's quite familiar with the QMJHL, our good friend Craig Eagles. Craig, thanks for jumping on and joining with us. I know summer's winding down up there. How are you doing? And again, thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure, guys. And episode 2. So here's a little story about the number 2. So my brother used to wear number 2 back in the days. So he was in my opinion, a much better defenseman than I was, and he always saw the political side of the game. So growing up, I'd always wear the number 2, to kind of look up to my bro. So you got to like that. You got to like the number 2.
Awesome. And we got Dom jumping in as well. Dom, always welcome to join at any time as well. I know he's got a lot going on, and as he says, he doesn't have much time, but thanks for tuning in, Dom. Huge inspiration for the show. Dom, we miss you around here and hope to have you on again soon. So hopefully everybody in the family is doing well. And with that, I mean, we got another season coming around with the QMJHL, a league that you're very familiar with, as well as the WHL and the OHL. Really, just because a lot of people down here in the U.S. aren't as familiar with how the CHL and those 3 leagues work. We're just familiar with the tier system, but those 3 are very much on a similar level because they go kind of more across the country. Can you just kind of give our viewers a little breakdown and listeners of kind of how those leagues work in conjunction with each other as opposed to working against each other?
Oh, it's a great question. Obviously, the Canadian Hockey League really has done a tremendous job at that partnership and not working against each league, but really kind of strengthening junior hockey in this country. And it's got a rich history of that. But right now, with the landscape changing in the NCAA rules, it's let really all 3 leagues kind of turn into the wild, wild west. And expansion, there's talk of expansion into the Q with regards to Lewiston maybe coming back. I think that story broke yesterday. So there's a lot of collaboration amongst the leagues. Players can't necessarily jump from each league. They have to go through a waiver process. So we have seen some players do really, really well after leaving the Q and jumping to the Western Hockey League, let's say. So Bailey Peach would be a great, perfect example of that. Led his team in scoring the year. So not a lot of room for an overager, a 20-year-old during his 20-year-old season. So the agent made a few phone calls. He slipped through the waiver wire in the Q, and that kind of allowed him to make the jump. So Bailey's playing U Sports hockey, which is another tremendous brand of hockey, which is they're going to take a hit because of the new NCAA rules as well. So again, rich tradition up here of major junior hockey, and Dom's well aware of that as well. It's a great brand, and they've they've tried to level the playing field with regards to rules. Obviously, as you know, the QMJHL, they allow fighting, but there's a limit to that. So, I wrote an article for Neutral Zone last year discussing maybe that's a hindrance for prospects wanting to, make an impact in that area of the game. So, yeah, it's a great brand of hockey. It's exciting to cover, and I think it's only going to gain more traction with the rule changes.
Kenny, did you have a question for him? He mentioned the NCAA, and we had a long conversation about that last week. So before I dive into that, I wanted to see if you had anything else on the junior leagues themselves.
No, not the junior leagues itself, but I would like to ask. We were talking a bit about it before we came on here. Do you think that the CHL NCAA rule, do you think it benefits both leagues? Do you think it's lopsided? Do you think it benefits maybe just the NCAA or more so the CHL? Or do you think it's just it doesn't benefit either and it's going to take away talent from both sides?
That's another great question, Kenny. I think right now it's benefiting player development in a whole. Sure, you're going to see some high profile players, and we've already seen that with the McKennas of the world. And why wouldn't you, if you're Gavin McKenna, why wouldn't you go and have one season against older players? Now, the argument, the NCAA is better hockey, better brand of hockey. We need to forget about that narrative and really focus on player development. And you guys know that I'm a big proponent of that. I think it's going to benefit goaltenders. I really do. I think NHL teams, given right, it's going to change their landscape of how they develop players. And from a signing situation, it's giving them even more time. Right. So let's say you draft a kid at 18. At 19, he chooses, or maybe, 19, he chooses to jump and goes to the NCAA. So that opens up even more time for him to percolate down there and develop. So I think right now, if you're the NCAA, you've got to do your homework on these players. But there's a great body of work. So we've seen a lot of overagers. We've seen, jumping after their Q career or their CHL career, and they're making an impact. Now, I'm talking with one Neutral Zone scout last year. I'm not going to mention names or anything, but, I was like, well, he's going to be a good third liner on that team. He's like, no, Craig, he's going to be one of their top players. And I'm like, seriously? He's like, yeah, he'll jump in and have an impact. I'm not going to mention the player's name either, but in that case, I think maybe we're underestimating the CHL and as far as what they have done from a developmental standpoint. It is going to hurt, Kenny, the youth sports, like I alluded to, but that's also going to strengthen our junior A levels across Canada. And have more exposure and eyes on that level, and it's going to give an opportunity to potentially a player to play college, Canadian college hockey or university hockey that might not have had that opportunity in years past with so much fluctuation with CHL players.
Yeah, Dom had this comment. He says, raise the draft age to 19, and the NCAA, CHL, and USHL will all benefit from the change. And I think that's something that is, I've heard it through many channels, and it's something that, it more educated names than I obviously are more pushing for it. But, it does seem to be kind of I don't want to say a solution, but in general, yeah, if you're able to only draft from a certain age up, and the NHL raises that and says that everybody else is going to be in this pool, then yeah, I mean, like you said, it's all about player development, and that's where, like you can go, like in the NCAA, people look at a program like BC and they look at it as a winning school, a winning program. But then they also look at it and go, if I go there and I play well enough, I'm going to have the eyes on me where people are going to see my game and I might be able to get a PTO or an ATO or something to continue my journey. And people who go to play there get it a little bit more, but even just playing in Hockey East, you have that exposure against a high quality team like that. You see it also in the CHL with a team like the London Knights. Everybody knows how their history of pumping out NHL players because they play a well-rounded game. They're not, it's not like it's a, go here and just have fun kind of thing. Like the players have fun, everyone enjoys it, but they also get them ready for the NHL. And that's where the reputation, I think, is more or less kind of going to come into play, which my first thought is you had a great article the other day about players getting cut and reassigned and kind of the approach to that in their development. But then just now you mentioned goaltenders benefiting from it. And Kenny, someone that you and I talked a lot about last year, and I'm sure, Craig, you're familiar with him. He just made the move from the OHL, but he spent, 3 seasons in the WHL before that. Now he's in the NCAA, and that's Austin Elliott. He just led London Knights last year in a championship run, but because he went undrafted, he was one of those overagers that you're talking about, that now he's going to get to go to the NCAA and show development path there.
Well, and guys, let's face it. If you're a student athlete, the opportunity now, there's CHL school money, as they call it. How's that going to work with the NCAA rule in schools? Obviously, there's some expectations academically to get into and gain access into the NCAA ranks. So there's that perspective to look at as well. But you're going to see players at 20 have 4 more years of playing. And at 24, especially a goaltender, you give them 3 solid seasons, let's say, at the NCAA level where they're standing on their head. They're getting even a better education, taking master's degrees and all this stuff. And then they come out, let's say at 23 or 24, and they're even more mature. It's great for the hockey world and it's great for the players. I think my only concern with that would be the Wild West approach, where you're going to start jumping from league to league and all this stuff. I think transparency is important. I think Dom has a great perspective with regards to the raising that draft age. But I think the real scary thing here that's going to impact junior hockey the most is if the American Hockey League lowers their age limit.
I was going to say the AHL is the league that I worry about.
Right. If they do that, it's going to attract even more players. And then, right, the player's got to make a decision. Okay, am I ready to step in? NHL teams, from a scouting perspective, go to NCAA. It's going to buy you even more time. Now, some organizations that are in retooling or rebuild will want to speed up that process and maybe rush a kid, or maybe go to them and say, okay, we need you now after 2 years down there. I don't know. But I will say this. I think the American Hockey League, if they lower things, that's going to hurt. And I think you don't want to take away from the best, right? The best developmental league in the world. And we can honestly say that's the American Hockey League. And if you're not watching the American Hockey League, and I'm just too busy to sit down and watch games because I'm in, Q rinks or rink and online and stuff like that. Don't underestimate the value and the impact and the quality of the American Hockey League. And a lot of young players are saying, oh, yeah, they're signing entry level contracts, but it's a two-way contract. And, they end up playing in the East Coast. So it's strengthening the professional ranks along with it. So I think that's a benefit, but it's a scary situation if the American Hockey League and if the NHL decides to lower that age, which I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to, kind of have a hands-off approach when it comes to that, and kind of let things play out.
Yeah, I think a good example of the AHL kind of finding its level. Just to use a local example, would be someone who you're quite familiar with in Loke Johansson, because he's kind of graduated from that juniors. Obviously, he came over from Sweden, and so his path was going to be a little bit different. We look at his path going to Moncton last year, and now he'll be with Providence. And then you see another local Bruins draft pick in Cole. I think it's Cole Spicer, who is kind of struggling with the NCAA route, went to the USHL route. And just a player like that, where school might not be the best path for him for whatever reason. That's where the ECHL, the AHL can come in and kind of offer a contract to get him to finish developing. Real quick, I do want to pull up Dom's comment here regarding the AHL and age for drafted players. The AHL can't control it. It's part of the NHL CHL agreement, so the CHL would have to agree. There is some misreporting of it. The MOU with the union says that the NHL will renegotiate with the CHL. It's not a done deal, which is what most media are reporting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's as Don knows, that's a scary proposition, in my opinion. To get back to your point, I think you're going to see more imports, obviously, given the change, the 3 import rule, where major junior teams can have 3 imports rather than just the 2 now. I think it's going to strengthen the league as well. I think more NHL teams, from a scouting perspective, will want their prospects or potential prospects to play a couple years in the CHL and then transition in the North American game, and then transition down to the NCAA ranks. As far as Loke Johansson is concerned, and Chris, we've talked a lot about his path and journey in the game so far, and the great season he had with the Wildcats countless times. There's one player, okay, a little insider information. He had a tremendous summer, so he's going to make some noise at rookie camp, at the showcase, and then in main camp. Okay. And I've got another little tidbit of information for you for later on in the show. Potentially a familiar partner on his right side.
Oh boy. Kenny, I know you've got some questions for Craig. Craig and I could talk to him all day, so I want to make sure that you've come up with some of your own good questions too. So don't let me hog all the conversation here.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it. Obviously, like, you two going back and forth. It's just like last time, where it's just, it's cool to listen. You guys are going back and forth. Of course, I'll always have questions, right? Like, this is newer to me. So, but I mean, I just wanted to ask, you're in Canada, right? So it's a little bit different, right? Most fans are kind of getting acquainted with the NCAA. A big issue down here in the United States, especially for me being in North Haven, Connecticut, 2 minutes from Quinnipiac. The big thing with the NIL money, right? Where I kind of feel like, okay, well, how is Quinnipiac supposed to compete with a Penn State, where they have a football team and they're able to give so much money to these players, I mean, how do the Canadian fans feel? Do they even really like, did Gavin McKenna even really have an opportunity to go back? I mean, I'm 18, right? If you're going to throw me $700,000 and tell me that I could go play at Penn State, that I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just saying, like, it's a good amount of money.
I have a theory about that before you answer, Craig. I really want to believe that $700,000 figure. Oop, did I freeze up?
It's all right.
I want to believe that 700K figure includes the value of playing at the school, like their tuition costs and stuff, and like their book compensation and just like all the costs of going to the school, not just a paycheck, if that makes sense. Like, you know how they get the stipend up there in Canada, Craig? I feel like there's some portion of it that is actually paid out, whether it's weekly or whatever. But I feel like a number like 700 grand for a team like Penn State, like I know Kenny, you mentioned they have a football program and it's a popular one, but they're not going to take all their football money and just all of a sudden dump it into their hockey program. Most schools don't think like that.
I just think that in McKenna's case, and he's a rare case, it's better for his development. Now, let's talk about a Caleb Desnoyers, 4th overall. He's banged up right now, went through surgery. He was hurt all last season. So if you're Utah, where do you want Caleb Desnoyers playing for the next season? Okay, well, you want him healthy, obviously, but you want him going back. They named him captain right after the end of the season. He's going to take on a leadership role, but after that, obviously, you would maybe want him to jump down and play one season in the NCAA and then be ready. So I don't think it's all about the money as a 19-year-old kid.
See, with
I really don't. I think it's about, okay, what's best for me right now and what's best for my development in the future. And you can throw money out and all this stuff and numbers, but when a kid, let's say, doesn't get drafted and he's 19 or he's 20, and guys, it's a really hard to be an overager in the CHL. There's only 3 spots on each team, and there was talk during COVID that they'd go to 4, but that wasn't the case. So three spots, there's not a lot of room. So as an overager, you want an impact player, but again, they're not looking at collecting money. And the CHL in years gone by, Kenny, if you played some pro games, you lost your school money. Like that money went away, and that team, right? So they sign you up, you sign the contract. It's a school agreement. Your money is there, but if you go play a pro for a certain amount of games, now they've dialed that back. U Sports are smart about it. They dial back the limitations with regards to, let's say, a struggling pro. You have 2 seasons in the East Coast, and you're a strong student. There's no room in the American Hockey League. Okay, let's go back and talk about going back to university, Canadian university. So they've waived some of those rules for the impact of coming back and playing and regaining your education. So Kenny, I think it's attractive, as far as the money goes and that type of thing. But I think for the player, they just want to improve and they just want to get better each and every day. And if that means going to the NCAA, that's fine. If that means sticking it out till you're 20 and having an impact and maybe being on a championship team and then making the jump to the NCAA, the money's going to be there, right? And the school is going to be there. And I think that's the option that a lot of these players and parents are looking at. So, and that's where the CHL can also be a jump off, a springboard or jumping off point to the NCAA. So really, they're in competition, but they're also in collaboration.
It's funny that you mentioned specifically Caleb Denoyer and that potential path of going back, for a year or two, with his current organization. He's with, he's still with Moncton. He'll still be with Moncton, right? So if he goes back to Moncton versus going the NCAA route, but then you mentioned a year in the NCAA, and that's where my brain goes, well, if I'm the American Hockey League, I go, well, what about us? If I'm the Utah Hockey Club and he's my draft choice, and I've drafted him this year, and I look at him and I go, okay, he's got the year of recovery, and then one more year after that where we can really be sure where his development is at. Like, do I want him in that second year going to the NCAA, or would I rather have him with my American Hockey League franchise? Now, we all know that some NHL organizations use their American Hockey League affiliate in other ways, and others use them as that developmental system. So it's a little bit different, I think, based on the philosophy of that NHL club. But I mean, let's be honest, Craig. If someone put a check in front of you for $250,000, all of a sudden the decision becomes a lot more difficult, even if it's not the full 700.
Well, that's a mammoth decision, no pun intended, obviously. But think about I do want to bring it, though. Like, you've already got your signing bonus. Let's say you've signed your entry level, right? So the money's going to be there.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that's kind of where my brain immediately goes, where it's like, okay, so you're completely skipping over the AHL. Now, some players are still going to need that year, so it's not the end all be all of problems or anything. I do like Dom's point here, though. If you could just really explain real quick what an overager is in the CHL, as Dom points out, I think there's a lot of viewers, especially down here in the States, who probably don't know what that term means.
So obviously, the CHL or Major Junior Hockey, you can apply for exceptional status, and there's been a few exceptional status that play in the league at 15. Okay, Gavin McKenna, as an example, right? Connor McDavid, Joe Veleno, right? All these players that apply for exceptional status. And some of them do get it and some don't. So you age out of major junior hockey. So you only have your 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 year. So let's say a player turns 21, halfway through their overage year, that's okay. You have to be, right? You can't be 20. So last year's age group, you're an 04, you age out of the CHL. So this year, if you're born in 2005, you're a 20-year-old. So again, let's say you're, born January 16th, 2005, you turn 21, you can continue to play and play out your junior career. There's only, like I alluded to before, there's only 3 overagers across each organization, across all 3 leagues. It did gain a lot of traction during COVID that, they might go to a 4 overage system. But again, the CHL, I don't think, wanted to go that route because they wanted to promote younger players and give them an opportunity to play. So that's essentially what the overage rule kind of, or that aspect of the game applies to that.
Now, Dom mentions it's all about the money, which at the end of the day, we know. He also points out that the NHL right now pays about $18 million a year to the CHL because of the way the players move and that sort of stuff. That's their agreement. And then asks imagine what that number would climb to if the CHL draft picks are able to go to the American Hockey League at 18 or at 19, which they currently can't do. I believe there's a new rule in the new CBA for the NHL, though, that each team will be allowed one 19-year-old to make that jump.
And before, Chris, it used to be Euros, right? Euros could come over, play that 1 year, and then they were allowed to play at the American Hockey League level. So, and then, you know, in a Euro situation, you wouldn't want your Euro coming back to your junior team because they would take up 2 spots as a 20, right? Your Euro or your import and a 20-year-old. Now, Moncton did that with a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Anyone, Kenny, do you know? Played for St. Louis.
I'm not
It's
gonna
okay.
know which one.
Barbashev. Okay, won a Stanley Cup in St. Louis, goes to Vegas, wins a Stanley Cup. Barbashev basically was married, living on his own, you know, during his 19 and I think, don't quote me on this, but during his 19 and 20-year-old seasons here in Moncton, had his wife over. You know, there's a perfect example of development on and off the ice with regards to, you know, experiencing the North American lifestyle, and it you know, benefited him greatly in his journey into the National Hockey League. So very, very few teams actually have their import players back as 20. Lokai, Hansen would be a perfect example of that. Do you think Boston's going to put him back in Moncton? Probably not, right at this point. So you let him go and get some games at the pro level.
Okay, so just real quick to clarify, that's what Dom was talking about. They can't at this time.
Exactly.
A lot of people are reporting that it's done, but it's not a done deal. And the United States with the NHL are trying to renegotiate that with the CHL. Okay, that's what he was referring to. I thought it was included that one could go.
Yeah, that's where the drama comes in all of this. And that's why it's this wild west approach, because it happened, the agreement happened so quickly that it left a lot of teams scrambling. Now, you know, Kenny, before coming on the show, you asked a good question about that. And really the pipeline is going to it's going to really come through the CHL, but only certain markets can attract US born players, right? Do you think a kid from, let's say, Connecticut is going to feel comfortable in a predominantly, and I don't like, you know, this example, but it's a legitimate concern for, you know, a kid maybe from Connecticut that is not familiar with, you know, the French language, to go into a predominantly French community to play hockey. Now, maybe they're open to learning the language. Maybe they've taken some French courses. Maybe they just live across the Canadian border. Right? There's all these variables that go into this. So that's where you would target some of maybe the Atlantic Canadian based teams. And we can say Atlantic Canadian based teams now because there's an organization that moved from Bathurst, New Brunswick to Newfoundland. So that pipeline is up the eastern seaboard is going to benefit a lot of Atlantic Canadian teams. And we're seeing that right now, you know, with the Moncton Wildcats, with their American born players. You know, why would they, and Kenny alluded to this, it was a great perspective, you know, Tornes coming up here, and as a 19, they drafted him, right? As a 19-year-old in the QMJHL draft, they snagged him up. So you ask, well, why would they draft a 19-year-old? Because they think he can have an impact, and he's going to have an impact. With Daniel Weah out of the lineup, they're going to need some offense early on, and I think he can bring it. Now, I haven't seen him play. I haven't darkened the door of a rink all summer, and that's fine by me. come the season, it's time. So, and I think we can all say, we're looking forward to the season starting, but guys, an off season keeps you more intrigued and it inspires you to be better during the season. And I think hopefully a lot of scouts feel that way coming back into the rinks.
Yeah, and real quick, Dom mentioned that he was going to send over the agreement, which he did, and it does point out in there that the NHL will reopen the agreement with the CHL to seek and eliminate the mandatory return rule for 19-year-old players, and that they're seeking to have no more than one per year allowed to the AHL. So, but it's funny because as you talk about it too, you mentioned Tornes, and then I thought of Poitras as well for Boston. Like these are guys like Tornes is already committed to UNH after a year in Moncton. And so it's like for every player where, you talk about a Gavin McKenna who gets that 1 year and then maybe jumps to the NCAA for a year and then jumps right to pro, you're going to have a guy who has to make all 4 jumps. And that's probably something that, Kenny, you and I watched Matthew Poitras in Providence last year going, this is what he needs to do to stick with the Boston Bruins, but he just wasn't NHL ready to do it. And so if he had that year in the NCAA and then, possibly a year where he can float between Boston and Providence, then imagine the player he could be in Boston, even as a smaller player.
Yeah, and I think Turnus's case is obviously a little bit different, right? He's not, going to the NHL yet. There's still work to be done, but I think that this was definitely a smart move considering, you're playing in the NHL and that's a huge jump to the NCAA. Going and playing juniors for a year is definitely a good idea, bumping it up a little bit. He just dominated the NHL. Like, it wasn't even funny. I mean, Danbury wasn't a great team, and he still put up over, a point per game. He was scoring at will. He was carrying this team through all their wins. Like, it was truly fun to watch. So I'm excited to see what he could do in Moncton.
And Kenny, you said maybe 1 year, right? It could be 2, right? They could, if he has an impact, could he play to try to earn a 20-year-old spot? Rudy Guimont, Detroit Red Wing prospect, 24-1 on his season last year here in Moncton. I know, it's Wildcats heavy right now, the discussion, but this is happening all across the CHL. So Rudy already had his agreement signed, his NCAA agreement. He's not signed, right, by the Red Wings. Okay, they came up and watched him play and all that. But there's a perfect example. Let's delay, right? Let's push back that agreement. And I think the NCAA organizations are okay with that, right? Because it gives them, right, another year of maturity before they come and arrive to their program. So in Rudy's case, he's going to come back to Moncton, which was a big signing for that group. He's going to see and a lot of the ice. He'll probably play, I would say 65 or 75% of the games for the Wildcats this year. So it's a win-win if you're looking at from that perspective. So I just think it's I think it's going to make a big impact on the game, and it allows players, and Dom will allude to this if he's still watching, it allows players to grow and truly find their identity and work on some aspects of their game that they need for the pro level. You mentioned Poitras. So if he's not ready for the National Hockey League, then why take him?
Like with the Bruins?
Yeah. So why did you have him up?
Last year?
Well, just any year.
Yeah, I mean
they messed that up. They royally screwed that up. So there's a player right now, okay, So
now they screwed it up because the rules forced their hand. He forced their hand in year one to keep him up because they needed a center.
Well, but he's 19. Go find a center. Go make a trade. Send him back to junior.
I agree with you. They screwed it up. I'm just saying if he was able to go to Providence as an 18, 19-year-old, then that changes his entire development path. And that's kind of the shining example that we're looking for. I would also point out too that, like, you know, if you look at a team like the Medicine Hat Tigers, for instance, you know, if Caden Lidstrom is healthy, you're potentially looking at a team with 3 100-point players on it at, you know, in their division. And it just becomes one of those things where it's, what's the development at that point when you have 3 players, all of who can, because they also had Gavin McKenna and there was one other kid who had over 100 points last year for him as well. I don't remember his name, but if all 3 of them have 100 points over, what is it, a 60 something game season, 65, 66 games?
64. The Q just went down by 4 games. So they used to be 68. They shortened the season by 4 games.
Let's just say, for the sake of math, it's 65 games. You have people putting up 2 points per game. Like, how are they getting better? They're, you know, as the saying goes, iron sharpens iron. Iron doesn't get sharper because it's stuck in water. And it just, like, you know,
where's
because
Lidstrom playing this year?
Lidstrom is
Michigan
set to go to what?
Michigan State.
Was it Michigan?
Yeah, I believe so.
So now we're going to have matchups of Caden Lidstrom against Gavin McKenna, and that's going to, you know, make them both better.
Yes. So the window, gentlemen, okay, goes from you at the CHL level. You want to project the kid, you know, from my, you know, my scouting days with, sorry, my dogs are going ballistic, but from my scouting days with Q Central, okay, we were projecting players at 19. From an NHL standpoint, you're projecting the player for 21 to 22 to 23. Where are they going to be at 23 years old? Okay, so the window for a championship run from a CHL perspective was you build towards their 19-year season. Okay, the bottom line is organizations have to change their approach. And if you don't change, okay, you're going to be left behind. So CHL organizations, the ones that get it right and do it the right way, and they're not cheating the game, guys. They're just using all their attributes and their assets in the right way. All right, attracting the pipeline like we alluded to before. Now, for small market teams, which is going to hurt the CHL the most, okay, that's where the small market teams are going to struggle. So we talk about expansion. That's great on one hand, but what about the small market teams that are hurting, that might not attract those players? So they've got to change up things too. So for the, again, let's use the Wildcats perspective. You win a championship last year, okay? You're thinking, oh, they're going to go through a rebuild. Why? They don't have to. They've got key assets coming back. You use your pipeline, you use your facility and all the variables that come with the Avenir Center. Okay, the Red Deer Rebels did the same thing. They changed their whole dressing room around. That's going to attract players. Your development pathways are going to, and your coaching. So CHL teams are tapping into that and saying, okay, we have to change the system in order to win earlier with these players under the new guidelines, rules, or the landscape. The landscape has changed. And I think teams that are on the cutting edge of that will do well. So Moncton's gearing up for potential, back-to-back run. And a lot of CHL teams are trying to make a 2-year run at a league championship. And some have. Chris, you mentioned the London Knights. Why are the London Knights so competitive, right? Oh, well, they have this, they have that, money, all this stuff, right? They're making thousands at the gate. The rink's jam-packed, 50/50s for their school, all this stuff, right?
You mean
For
it's
their
not all
school
Dale
fund.
Hunter?
Well, but they have coach, they have a GM. Euros come there. Look at their imports over the years, right? So are they reinventing the wheel somehow? No. They have tapped into the right formula. And organizations like, let's say, the Halifax Mooseheads, okay? The Mooseheads they're going to have a pipeline to the American Eastern Seaboard, and they have. And they've attracted a lot of good, solid American-born players in the past, and they will continue to do that. So you've got to adjust to the landscape. You really do, and that's the name of the game right now.
Now, I know someone mentioned Maine earlier, and I know there's some rumblings that they're trying to get an additional Q team in Maine, and like there's talks about it. Do you think having some of those junior level teams, maybe just over the border, might help with gaining some of the traction as far as because it maybe melds the game a little bit more. Some of those in the US are going to be a little bit more familiar with the NCAA, and that by having a team that is US based, maybe either as an opponent or having someone that you need to scout against, you might just be a little bit more exposed to it before. I mean, what's that level been like? I mean, obviously you guys know the NCAA has existed. It's not like you guys are completely blind to it, but what has been the thought process? Like people down here, a lot of people, not everybody, let me make that clear, kind of go, oh, Canadian juniors, okay, yeah, it's a thing, but like, players are a long way away from the NHL at that point. And then all of a sudden we get all the hype for the NCAA tournament for what, maybe a month, Kenny? Is a month long. And for some reason that 1 month hones people in on the NCAA, but they still don't care about the CHL. How is that from the Canadian perspective? And is it changing because of the new options?
It's a great question. I think up here, a lot of families and a lot of players had to make the choice, right? Given the old rules, and they were criticized for choice in the game of hockey. And I've written about this, and I've said it time and time again. You wouldn't think choice is controversial, but it is, right?
Well, I mean, it's only controversial when they make the wrong one.
Yeah, but it's controversial because in the years gone by, teams would say, okay, well, you just ruined your hockey career. And that was the feeling, right? So in this region, and maybe across the country, we're very CHL centric. And one could say that's the same perspective with regards to the NCAA south of the border. So you have players like Connor Garland, Adam Pino, Keith Yandel, right, that came up. Connor is a perfect example. I didn't think he would have an impact at the NHL level like he has, right? Based on he was taking 3-minute shifts in junior. 3-minute shifts were commonplace for Connor Garland, and he was pretty much one-way player. Didn't back check a whole bunch, and look at him now. So I think this new rule has opened people's eyes to the other side of the game, if you will. And I think that's great, and I think it's given more options and more choice to players at every level, right? So our junior A ranks here in the Maritime Hockey League, and there's the NCDC's coming in, right, into this area, which is, some players have jumped from the Maritime Hockey League, which is our tier 2 junior A level, which is a great league in itself, but that league has turned into an older league. So we need to make leagues younger, right? And I think that's what Dom was talking about. I know Murph from Neutral Zone retweeted one of the tweets saying they need to make a U19 league, right? To help players, and that alleviates these U18 AAA players going back to play another year of U18 when they should be playing a tier 2 for their development. So it opens up all these different options and choice. So I think to get back to the root of your question, Chris, it's okay, let's look at players and the choice that they have, and let's make, hopefully they make the right choice for their development. And if they don't, then they have an opportunity to change their mind.
Yeah, and Dom points out, let's not forget how many players have jumped from the USHL to the CHL, which is just another pool and another, I mean, I think at the end of the day, a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say. So, it'll take a couple of years for everything to kind of even out and for water to find its level. But eventually, I think teams will learn that, as you were saying, they'll attract better players by putting themselves in a better position to either A, win or develop and get to the next level. If a team can embrace, I think that's one of the things the London Knights have done, is they embrace that if the right thing for you is to come here for 1 year, we're going to do our damnedest to make sure we try to win in that 1 year. And then if you move on to the next level, then that's what's best for you. We'll figure out our own stuff because you're here to help us for a year, and we'll take that.
Kenny, have you heard tell of Ty and Lawrence? You heard tell him?
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, Shikutami Saganin, drafted him. They took a chance on him. Josh Lawrence, his brother, played in St. John, won a Memorial Cup, playing over in Europe. Okay. Small in stature, great skill. Tynan just, played impact player here with the Helenka. Dom just said it in the comments. He's a fantastic player. So why is Lawrence not playing in the CHL? Now, Shikutami right now are probably within the top echelon, top 3, maybe even top 2 in the QMJHL right now. Blameville probably on paper, and paper don't mean shit right now. But on paper, Blameville has one hell of a hockey club. Shikutami is very, very good as well, and they've built to this point. But why is Lawrence still playing the USHL? Because they believe that's the right place for him at the right time for his development.
Which ties into Dom's comment here. He says, I firmly believe the USHL and CHL will be under one umbrella in the future.
Well, and that's why we're seeing the expansion. Guys, like the BCHL. Oh, well, you got to go to the BCHL. You got to go to the BCHL. It's a better league than the CHL. It's this, it's that. It's this outlaw league. It's Hockey Canada doesn't recommend players going there. They're not going to insure it. Now look, right? Expansion into the WHL, right? 2 names. Josh and Bradley Nadeau.
Can't say I'm familiar.
Maine.
U of Maine.
Yep.
Bradley Nadeau, phenomenal hockey player. Josh Nadeau, phenomenal hockey player. I saw Josh at 15. He was outstanding. And I don't want to bore people with stories of I went down to St. John. I caught 2 periods of the St. John Sea Dogs game. That game started a little earlier, so I caught the 10 minutes of the third period and decided to travel back, back home, and on the way is Quispamsis. So I pulled into Quispamsis to check out the U18 game. I walk into the rink. Josh Nadeau, who's playing for Fredericton, he had to bill it. He had to bill it in Fredericton because he lives up in the northwestern part of the province. So he had to move away at 15. His draft year, his 15-year-old year, his first year in U18 hockey, he was 5'6", 130 pounds. He comes down the right side, beats the guy wide, takes a slap shot, the goaltender doesn't move, scores. Blown away. I saw him in the Monktonian, which is a big tournament around here. Wrote an article on him. And at that time, I thought I was going to get in shit for it because here I am, the Q Central scout, right, for New Brunswick, and I'm showcasing one player in particular. The optics they don't look good there, guys. But I wanted Q teams to realize that it doesn't matter how tall you are or how much you weigh. If you can play the game, you can play the game. And Josh Nadeau can play the game. And Bradley, Bradley is that much better than Josh. So Bradley has 3 games at the National Hockey League level already. Went to U of Maine for 1 year. Signs his entry-level contract. I'm like, well, why would Carolina want him? Right? Why wouldn't they let him percolate there? Well, look at his stats. Scored 32 goals in the American Hockey League. And he should have been on the ice a hell of a lot more during the World Juniors last year. Because he was one of the best players they had. But in that system, he only saw third-line minutes, which is bullshit too, in my opinion. Opinions like assholes, everyone has one.
Yeah.
But my opinion on the Nadeaus, they left home to play U18 hockey. And then they made the decision, not to go the traditional route, which was hard. It was hard for them to make. So Josh went and played Maritime Hockey League during COVID. Lit the thing up. Oh, well, he's too small. He's going to get hurt. No. Lit it up. They both go to the BCHL. And look, just, again, humor me. I'm not a stats guy. But go look at their stats in Penticton for the Vs. And that became a pipeline to the NCAA.
Kenny,
right?
you
The
want to pull it up, or do you want me to?
was a main pipeline to the NCAA route. But, Josh Nadeau is going to play pro hockey. Bradley Nadeau, if Carolina gives him an opportunity, and I told a person today, if they give him a good opportunity on a third line, he can score 10 to 15 goals in the National Hockey League level because he's a sharpshooter. You don't score 32 at 19 in the American Hockey League if you can't score.
Yeah, it might take a little bit of time for him to adapt his game overall, but good hockey players figure it out.
Well, you put him on the second unit power play in Carolina, he's going to score goals.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, well, they took the wrong path. They took this, they did that.
Is it the wrong path if you get there?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say, Chris. It's not. So that family, and those players in this neck of the woods, they're doing their own thing. They took the wrong path. They'll never, right? Rimouski went after Bradley. Bathurst drafted Josh in the 5th round, and they were close to getting them, really close. And back then, you could only stay the 48-hour rule, but the parents, right, you could pay extra time. But if they play one exhibition game, their NCAA eligibility went out the window.
Have a good night, Dom. Thanks for jumping in, and thanks for the
Thanks,
insight.
Dom. Great to hear from you.
Always great to have you. So
So-
even if it's just in the comments.
So in this case, Josh Nadeau decides, listen, I'm done. I want it, right? COVID hits, yada, yada, yada. Now look at Josh Nadeau now. Right?
Kenny, were you able to pull up the stats?
Yeah, they are pretty unbelievable. Bradley Nadeau playing his second year with the Pecton V's, 113 points in 54 games. Josh Nadeau, 110 points in 54 games. Also, this team, they're pretty solid. They have Suniev as well, 90 points in 50 games. And then another name that I noticed, Luca Di Pasquo, also going to be playing for the University of Minnesota this year. I think he backed up Trey Augustine last season as well. So, I mean, this team is stacked. But this doesn't really surprise me, especially for the NCAA route. Obviously, like I said, I live next to Quinnipiac. I've seen a lot of players that I'm like, who are these people? Oh, they played in the BCHL last season. Now they're coming to the NCAA and absolutely lighting it up. So, I mean, unbelievable.
It's funny, though, because those stats fall right in line with Gavin McKenna in, Caden Lidstrom and some of those guys in their CHL seasons.
You're going to love Kenny. You're going to love Vidicek. If you go see Quinnipiac's games, you're going to love Vidicek.
Yeah.
You're going to love him.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to get out there for some games. I see a lot of, there's a lot of exciting players coming to Quinnipiac, especially from the USHL as well. And then you see they get some CHL guys. It's going to be an exciting season for sure.
I'm going to try to get out to a couple.
Yeah, you gotta.
There's going to be a lot out there, and not just from the perspective of the drafted guys, but it's the undrafted guys that probably are a little bit more interesting.
So Marcus Vidicek, name sounds familiar, Chris?
I feel like I've heard it a couple times, but I
attended Bruins rookie camp, dev camp for 2 seasons in a row.
Okay, that's where I would have heard it from, because again, for me, like I said, Dom has really put a lot of inspiration into the show, and probably more than he even realizes, just because doing the shows covering the prospects with him just in the Bruins organization and that sort of thing, like it's just watching as the players develop their game and try to get to that next level. And I know Dom made the comment earlier about how it's all about the money, but really the fandom comes from watching players take their journeys. And if they can if all the leagues can come together and kind of put their collective brain power together, that's what's going to grow the game. Because you can get involved with a player, at a whole different level when they're at a Moncton or at a Penn State or, at a BCHC or whatever, at those levels, you can get involved because those teams, when they're selling tickets, when they're doing stuff in the community, there's a lot more access to them. Like you just know that there's someone out there with some stories about when they went to a game and they saw Sidney Crosby before he got drafted, and that, I guarantee you, those people are sitting there watching Crosby's career, and they're more fans because of the player, regardless of where his career is gone.
Yeah. Here's something for you, okay? So I'll give you the games played and the points for those stats people out there, because I could give a rat's ass about stats. But it is what it is, I guess.
Stats matter, but the context of those stats matter more.
Okay. So 43 games, 31 points as a 16-year-old on a rebuilding team. 68 games, 65 points on a good young team. 68 games played, 80 points on a team vying, upper echelon team. 64 games played, 88 points on a team that made it to the finals. And then a season ago, okay, or actually didn't make it to the finals that season for the 88 points, but it was the year before. And then a season ago, 64 games, 64 points. Here are the goal totals for those years: 10, 18, 32, 45, and 38. And the player is Marcus Vidicek, and he's arguably, or was arguably, the best two-way player in the Q a season ago. So, Kenny, that's what you have to look forward to if you go to those games.
Yeah, I do remember Vidicek, not from development camp necessarily, but he did play in the Prospects Challenge, I believe, last season with the Boston. So that is where I do know that name.
So
yeah, I think that I think
you give Vidicek, sorry, Kenny, but you give Vidicek 4 more years.
Yeah.
4 more years to develop. Where's he going to be at 24?
Yeah, and I think, he's in a program where it's just the development and playing 4 years, he's going to have the opportunity to play in big games as well. I mean, you look at the NCAA and you look at the teams that typically win, and they're teams that aren't necessarily built with star power, but they're built with players who have been there for 3 or 4 years and have played in the big conference games, and they've played in the big NCAA games. And that's kind of just what it is here at Quinnipiac. It's, you have guys coming around for the 4th season. You have guys like Odin Tufto, who's, an ECHL guy, kind of rivaling Cole Caulfield, in the point total that season. And it's like, everybody knows Cole Caulfield, nobody knows Odin Tufto, but it's just, that's how it is in the NCAA. You look back at all of these, all these champions. You look at Denver, right? Chris and I talked about it last week. You look at Quinnipiac, right? They're beating teams like Boston College, who have the James Hagens and the Ryan Leonards and the Gabe Perreaults. So another 4 years is going to be interesting. And we, you talked about it earlier about Austin Elliott. It's intriguing for a team like UMass Lowell. It's not a blue blood school. It's not a Boston College. It's not a Boston University, but he's played in big games. He's played in Memorial Cup games. He's played in, OHL games, like, bigger games. And then taking those are the goalies that you do not want to face if you're Boston College in the first round. The guys who have been there and done that. That's how UMass Lowell makes it. And then now he's playing in bigger games and all that. It's just, it's going to be interesting to see for sure.
And that's how you build out your program.
And you mentioned UMass Lowell, but I mean, think about UMass at Amherst, where Lodge Mellis played last year. They got Hrabel in net. We were talking about the Utah Hockey Club earlier. Talk about a prospect that they were looking at, and in his development path, he's played in World Juniors games,
big World Juniors games, medal rounds. So
yeah, I think he a silver medalist at one point.
Also a bronze medalist, I believe. That game was ugly, too. He played against Finland. I remember he gave up, I think, like 4 goals in the first period, ended up getting pulled, but they still ended up finding a way to win the game. So he definitely has a medal. So,
yeah.
But even those games where you're not playing well, but, you're still in that situation. Yeah, 2 bronzes. Hey, listen, I have no bronzes, so who am I to be like, oh, bronze medals? Like, but even if you're not playing well in those games, now you know what not to do for next time when you're going to, UMass Lowell. So UMass Amherst. So, like I said, it's going to be fun to watch when you have those goalies that, these NCAA fans haven't seen before. And they're like, wow, Austin Elliott just stood on his head and, stonewalled James Hagens and Oscar Jelvik and all those guys. Fans better be ready. It's going to be a fun year in the NCAA.
Well, experience is value.
Yeah, absolutely. It's. I mean, we're so excited for the NCAA season, but I mean, you've got the OHL season, which, by the way, shout out, OHL is now going to be on Flow Hockey. So just another reason to get the Flow Hockey program. I have to go back and double check and see where the cost is at for this year, but I don't know if it went up with the new OHL agreement.
It's worth
in
it.
there.
That's all they need to know.
It's going to be worth it. I mean, you've got the American Hockey League, you've got the OHL, you've got the Q. Like, just those 3 leagues alone, I want to say it's about 150 for the year. Kenny, does that sound right?
Yeah, last season it was 150 for the year. completely worth it. I like if you're a hockey fan, you're gonna enjoy it. You're gonna have hockey. You're gonna have so much hockey to watch. It is the best subscription that you can watch. I would give up Hulu. I'd give up Netflix. I'd give up cable if I could have Flow Hockey. So
Okay,
and
just a
then I
sec,
think
Kenny.
it's
Let's make note of that here.
yeah.
Kenny will give up. Well, in fairness, around here, cable is not worth what it used to be worth anyway. So the value's gone down, the
Netflix, Ken.
price has gone up.
Netflix.
I'm
That's-
willing. I'll give
That's
it up.
commitment right there.
Yes. Well,
What does
that's-
Netflix have for hockey? Maybe a couple movies?
Oh, you never know. Coming up, eh?
You know, hey, Disney Plus, you get the ESPN, so you got some college hockey there. You got Miracle, the couple of the movies that really matter. So beyond that, I think Kenny,
30
the
for
ones that you're gonna,
30s.
yeah, the 30 for 30s, Kenny. I think you're gonna miss out on Happy Gilmore and Happy Gilmore 2. So
it's all good. I
What
already
about the
watched
Ocho?
it.
What about the Ocho? ESPN Ocho.
I
Disney
think that's
Plus,
part of
or-
the that would be part of the Disney Plus package. Yeah. Although ESPN's coming out with this whole new ESPN only package or whatever. I don't know. All the
So-
ESPN stuff.
Little insider. It was all. I think it was already announced, and then they took it back down. But Dylan McKinnon, who is a Nashville Predators third rounder, didn't sign. Is going to be attending the Bruins rookie camp, and we'll see where that leads. So he is a 20-year-old defenseman, right shot D-man, and Chris, you're very familiar with his exploits because he played the bulk of the season with Woke until Dylan Gill, who's a Tampa Bay draft pick, came in and came from the American Hockey League as an overager, came back to the Q, and really changed the outlook for the Wildcats as season go. So here's the question: okay, would you, if you're the Bruins, going into camp and rookie camp, and then potentially, hey, American Hockey League camp, would you want Dylan McKinnon playing with a familiar person on his left? He's a right shot D-man. Loke's a left. Makes sense, right? So where does Loke start the season? Is he strong enough to jump in and play American Hockey League games, or is he going to be in the East Coast? And would you sign Dylan McKinnon, who's as tough as nails and would pretty much fight anyone, sticks up for players, has some offensive upside, skates incredibly well, just needs to process a little bit better and really focus in on the little things. But I think at the pro game, those little things might turn into big things for Dylan. So if you're the Boston Bruins and you're their organization and their scouting group, would you sign a player like McKinnon to a potential East Coast and American Hockey League contract?
I'll let you take this one first, Kenny.
Yeah, I mean, it always depends, especially, if you're going to go to the East Coast, like that's completely fine. I know Providence right now has just a ton of defensemen. It's going to be even difficult for Loke to get minutes on that team. Last year it was difficult for Jackson Edward to get minutes, to the point at the end of the season, he didn't start for like a whole month before being sent down to the ECHL, where he did some very great things. First, got suspended first period for dropping the mitts off the face-off. But you're just down there to get minutes. So, it really depends, what Boston's looking at, what Boston thinks about Loke, and it'll be interesting because, like I said, Providence has, a bulk of defensemen right now. You have Brunet, Callahan's going to be back. You're Jackson Edward, you're going to try to find him minutes for his second year now. You're going to have probably Harris or Soderstrom coming down as well. So you have Billy Sweezy, who's going to be returning. He's going to probably be a captain. So it depends on, where you can fit these players. But having them at camp, why not? Why not? What's the worst that could happen? You don't sign him. He comes to camp. Whatever. I would definitely take a look. Again, I don't know. I would have to watch him more, but it could work if that's the plan. Having a friendly face down in the ECHL, two guys who are together, like why wouldn't you want that? Especially if you're an ECHL team, you wouldn't want two guys with chemistry, young guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're talking about bringing someone into camp, I think for the most part, 99 times out of 100, the answer should always be yes, because you get to see what they look like with your guys in your facilities. Like you get to see them in person, and I don't think there's enough value placed on that overall. Like, yeah, there's a lot that you can learn from film, but I mean, Craig, you can attend. Player in person is always better than doing it via film. Oh, did I freeze up?
The eye test. The eye test is everything. Eye test is everything.
So
you got to be there. Now, video. I'll tell you, video is a great platform. It's phenomenal. It's an asset. Okay. And it's great for exposure and seeing players, but there's no alternative to the eye test. But with that being said, okay, obviously we know that Adam McQuaid was in Moncton a few times to see and check on loci. We know that Don Sweeney was in Moncton to obviously check on loci development, but also to scout Caleb Daniel-A late in the season. So we know those things. So
I mean, they're inviting him into camp because they're familiar with him too. So
well, exactly. So there's a perfect opportunity. Hopefully, a former third round NHL draft pick might have a little runway with the Bruins organization. And let's face it, you're a right shot D man with a little bit of offensive upside, and you're tough as nails, and you just about do anything. I've seen the kid since he was 15. He's built like a brick shithouse, strong as an ox, and would do just about anything to win hockey games for your organization, and would protect and stick up for players. Why wouldn't you? Right?
Yeah,
what's there to lose?
I look at the defense, Kenny. I know that you mentioned there's a lot of them down there, but a lot of them are on the left side. Jackson Edward is the one where you go, okay, he's a left shot, but he can play the right. So, like, how much does that really bolster your right side depth, though? Because you really don't know what you have at the AHL, let alone the NHL level in Jackson Edward, because he wasn't pushing for that play time last year. So, like, you bring in a guy like McKinnon, and maybe at worst it lights a fire under Jackson Edwards' ass, and you get a better player out of him. The competition can not just push the player that you brought in, but the other players around him. I know Bruins fans are sick of hearing about internal competition going into training camp every year, but when you're trying to compete, players want players that are going to help push them around them.
Certainly didn't see that last year, did you?
No. Let's not talk about last year for the Bruins.
Oh, no. But I'm just saying, stating facts. Right? Stating facts.
Yeah. No, there was a lot missing. And certainly that competition. And, when you end up with guys like who were some of those second liners, Kenny, towards the end of the year? I'm blanking. I mean, who's the one in Toronto now?
Vinny Lettieri.
Was it Lettieri?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they got Farinacci still down in Providence. But when you got guys like that on your second line, who's pushing who for what at that point? It's just not the same. So,
yeah, I mean, I'll push back a little bit. I would definitely say that when Jackson Edward actually was given, the opportunity to play game after game, and not just like one start here, when he was given an extended period to show, I honestly believe that he was fantastic. I was excited to see more. There were mistakes, but he did end up scoring his first professional goal. I was there live in Bridgeport watching that one. So obviously internal competition is great. But you're saying like last year, he didn't really push. Sometimes there just isn't room, and it's unfortunate. And I thought that Jackson Edward, if given the opportunity, would have done more. And again, it's unfortunate. Providence had a logjam last season, and a great example of this is Riley Duran, right? He was playing fourth line. He wasn't playing every single game. And then, a few injuries happen and they promote Duran to the second line. Then by the end of the season, he's getting an opportunity in the NHL. That's just how it is. He took the opportunity and ran with it. And I believe Jackson Edward did the same when given that opportunity. So I'm excited to see what he could do this year.
Yeah, no, I think there's more there as a player, but just, I think there's more that you can push from him as well. And, obviously he's got to control certain aspects of his game. And maybe McKinnon comes in and, you're able to look at McKinnon and you say to Jackson Edwards, like, right now you're too much of a liability when we put you on the ice. We don't know if you're going to be getting put in the box or thrown out of the game. Trevor Kuntar kept getting thrown out of the game and he's not back. And so now you sit there and you kind of bring in a player who can bring the grit that he brings. But, now you get a choice between player A and player B. Both of them are now going to have to elevate their game. So maybe you get a better player out of McKinnon and pairing him with Loke. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer there because, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you want Andre Gasso and Kenny, who's the one I'm blanking on there, that's been at BC together for a couple years now. They've been on the same line. Jelvik, thank you. Like,
Yes.
Why wouldn't you want them on a line for as long as possible if you can keep them together, if it breeds success?
Yeah, but from what I'm hearing, why wouldn't you want that player just in the locker room, right? You just said, in the internal competition, and Craig's talking about what he's willing to do for the team. That's a guy I want younger guys around. Even though he's going to be a younger player, I want other players to look at that and be like, hey, listen, he's given everything on the line. And he's not drafted. He was a free agent. He signed here. He's given everything. I feel like I need to give more. Those are the guys you need in the locker room, especially at the younger levels. And you touched on it earlier about the eye test and going and seeing it live. What do you two look for live that you can't see and a fan can't see necessarily on TV or on the computer?
Great question, Kenny. For me personally, during COVID, we did a lot of online scouting. I wanted to see the camera across from the benches because I wanted to see players coming back to the bench. I wanted to see their interaction with their coaches, their teammates, just the little things.
The demeanor of the player.
Yeah. But you're watching a hockey game online or on TV. Where's the camera? It's on the puck. I in the rinks you're seeing play away from the puck, and that's what made the Josh and Bradley Nadeau's of the world and the Caleb Denways of the world, right? And all I can go down the list. When I first started scouting and covering, I came into the Q as a broadcaster in 2015 and started scouting in December of 2016. Really, I saw Thomas Chabot at 18, and he was skating rings around people. He was hogging the puck a little bit. He'd hang on to it too long. I saw Zaboral in his draft year. On that St. John Sea Dogs team, I also saw Matthew Joseph. So for me, Joseph was that standard of, okay, this kid's an NHLer. Well, he's a third line NHLer, but he's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion already. And he's one hell of a third liner at the National Hockey League level. Right? So, the Ivan Barbashevs of the world, did I ever expect him to be a 2-time Stanley Cup champion? No. The Connor Garlands, right? So you learn, right, when you go into the rink, you're always, and I think we've talked about it before, Kenny, but you're always trying to pick the brains of other scouts and other NHL scouts, and you're trying to learn from your mistakes, right? So you don't have that opportunity watching online.
Yeah,
and
and
just the atmosphere, but also the play away from the puck, the play behind the puck, um, and how the players react. You see a lot of the we'd call them intangibles or variables, but you see and you tap into their character and their integrity as players. You know, one example, I saw a young U18 player. This is draft year. He's 15. He was a hell of a player. Hung on to the puck too long. 2-on-1s, he'd always shoot. He was selfish. Um, I told some of my scouting colleagues and my scouts, or my other colleagues at Q Central, that I wouldn't draft a kid with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't touch him because of those things. He's an NHL draft pick. He's a solid American Hockey Leaguer, and he probably might have a shot at making a club this year. So players grow, right? There's a 15-year-old kid learning how to play and learning how to become a player. He had a solid Q career, obviously, right? NHL draft pick. So you learn a lot by going to the rink, and you probably learn a lot more than just sitting in front of a screen. But it's just, you have to learn from your mistakes. And when you go into a game and you have to process that, I think that the most difficult challenge right now is, let's say I'm watching two teams that I haven't really seen or seeing for the first time. So one team, as far as my breakdown goes, I watch one team for the first period. I watch the opposing team for the second period. And then I evaluate both teams in the third. And then I zero in on particular players in the third period. So out of that one game, I might have 12 reports or 10 reports.
yeah,
But
I think it also,
out of those 10, there's probably 3 players that are potential legitimate NHL or NHL draft choices. And then you would gauge and rank them accordingly.
yeah, I think it also kind of depends on what you're scouting for too, because if you're trying to scout a particular player, going to watch that player, you're able to focus on them and only them, but how everything around them affects them. So just as an example, I mean, think about how often you may want to see a goaltender's reaction to something after the play, but instead the TV camera is showing you a replay of something that you saw 5 minutes ago, because they're trying to keep the live viewers' attention. And if you have, scouting softwares and stuff like that, you might be able to see different angles, but it doesn't capture necessarily everything. If a goalie gives up a bad goal, for instance, are they getting down on themselves after? What's their demeanor after they retrieve the puck, and as the rest of the team is kind of going back to center ice for the next faceoff? Or are they barking at a defenseman because they don't think it was their fault, even though they very clearly misplayed it? And as you alluded to, Craig, it's you're trying to project the attitude of a 15 or 16-year-old or a 17 or 18-year-old. And I mean, let's face it, they're going to grow. It's just a matter of, if you scout them in person and you see how they react, you can then also get to know the player and see maybe they were just having a bad day that day, and you can say, well, that reaction's out of character. Maybe someone had said something to him, and when you're just watching it on film, I think the film is better for technical and technique things as opposed to, the person. Like you can go in person, you're scouting the person. Film helps you scout the player. Does that make sense, Craig?
Yes. Just like little things that you would see live, you don't necessarily see those on, right? the video might reinforce something that you see live. And then, you can zero in on scouting platforms like TPE or obviously Instat, Huddle Instat. You would zero in on, okay, where does he pivot? How does he pivot? Where's his stick position? How does he defend? But it's the live action, and you see more growth and progression live than you would on screen. Obviously, you can't really judge speed on some of the scouting platforms. And sure, they're trying to, have all the analytics and all that's great. And all the sub clips like shots on goal, shots from the blue line, all those things, goalie actions, right, Kenny? But I think the most important thing live is your ability to really process, right, and do deep dives on players, and not necessarily, look for, oh well, that guy screwed up there, right? Well, why did he screw up? And maybe it wasn't him that screwed up. Maybe his D partner was out of position, or maybe his forward didn't support the puck. So in Lokai's case last season, early on, he was trying to do too much when he had the puck. And on a defensive side of things, he was losing his man to the boards wide. So his angles on his pivots were off. One mentor that I have and who's been fantastic talks a lot about posture with young defensemen, and it's everything, right? So you're defending at 6'2", let's say, or 6'3", but if your posture changes, you're now 5'8", 5'11", 5'10". So yeah, really just little things like that. And again, that's why you always stay open to learning. And in this game, especially in this business, if you ask the right questions at the right times, and you are willing and open and receptive to learn, you're going to grow in that area. I try to learn something new every day, right? Every day I walk into a rink, I try to learn something new. Just like, when I walk into my classrooms, because I'm a traveling teacher, I don't have my own classroom. So I have 4 different classrooms a day, but I have the same kids. I want those kids coming to my class, and I want them learning something new every day. And I want to learn something new about those students, because that's what makes you better, right? That's how you grow as a teacher, as a scout, as an apprentice, electrician or plumber, or whatever the case might be, in any walk of life. So if you're willing and receptive to learn, then that's going to take you where you want to go.
And it's funny that you mentioned posture, because I remember the first day of Bruins development camp. I want to say it was Dean Letourneau. There was one player in particular, though, as people were coming in and, watching, I kept hearing people say, oh, does he look taller than last year? I want to say it was Dean Letourneau. And it's one of those things where maybe the player grew an inch or two. It's absolutely possible. But as soon as you mentioned posture, I just remember thinking and just hearing how many people, because they're watching them in person now, sit there and go, they look taller than last year,
Right.
And maybe it's just something he learned at how he was skating last year. I think it was Letourneau. So I would say at BC, but it just, so many people commented on it, and I found that funny. But I promised we'd keep you for about 6 hours. But I know you do have to get into I'd say the office, but to school tomorrow. Kenny, I want to see if you have any other questions. I could chat with Craig all night, and I'm sure people could enjoy listening to it all night, but I also don't want to bore people to death. There's not any live action hockey to talk about. So I know we want to have you back when there is plenty of Q hockey to actually talk about, Craig. But Kenny, any final questions for Craig for this episode?
Yeah, I have one more. You're scouting the QMJHL and you're working with younger players. What are you looking for before they get to the QMJHL? Like, say you're going to be drafting somebody. What are you looking for in those players? Because they're so young, right? You talked about Josh Ndoen being smaller, but he has a ton of skill. It's like these players are so far away from, their potential. It's like, what do you look for in those players that, has some indication that they have the ability to grow into something that, can be beneficial for whatever franchise you're working for?
Oh, that's a great question, Kenny. So I will tell you this, and another two-time Stanley Cup champion, and told me this. Uh, he's a pro scout. I'm not going to tell you which organization or anything like that, but um, this is the type of guy that he is. So I was working on an article, and something was really bothering me. So I picked up the phone and called him, and he answered. He was on the golf course. It was the off season, of course, but he said, I said, well, what about your mistakes? What about, those? I feel bad that I missed on this player. Why did I miss on this player? And he just said, Craig, you carry those mistakes with you every time you walk into the rink. So, listen, I'm not the be all end all of scouting, and I don't attest to be. And like I alluded to before, you try to learn something new. So if you see something in a player, sure, you have comparables, right? And those are important. But another, Craig Button. I talked to Craig about this, and he said if you're not willing to make projections, that's part of the job. You have to make those projections. And in Craig Button's case was he doesn't like to say this player is like that. There's some similarities to that player. So that's where your experience comes in, right? So what are you looking for? Is it processing? Is it speed? Is it hockey IQ? Is it intangibles? Is it character? Right? So obviously if you can't skate and you can't process it, right? So some teams, some organizations, some scouts, we all see it differently, Kenny, right? I'm sure, here's a name from the past. What was Glenn Murray like at 18? What did the Bruins see in Glenn Murray? Oh, well, he'll never skate at that level, right? So, he had 1,000 games, right? So,
Yeah.
like why did players or teams pass on Marty St. Louis, or why did teams what did teams see in Tim Thomas that other teams didn't, or something like that? You're always going to have those. So you zero in on what you want to see in a player, and maybe what a player brings and the intangibles that they possess. And that's where you make your projections. There's one player in particular that unfortunately he just got released, reassigned, cut, whatever the hell you want to call it. So here's an 18-year-old kid that was pretty high profile. I don't know what direction he's gonna go, but it's really unfortunate, right? And there's some injuries there that I didn't know about, but I heard through the grapevine there might have been some injuries there. And where was he at 16, right? So the progression, every player, Kenny, has a ceiling, and some players that ceiling taps out at 34, right? Some players' ceilings tap out at 19, and some players' ceilings tap out at 16 or 17. That's not a knock on the player. That's just the way it is. So when you see a player that, obviously the can't miss players like the Joe Thorntons of the world, or right, like they're special players. So those special players only come around so long. And that, going back to the Nadeaus, that's why I wrote so much on the Nadeaus. That's why I wrote so much about Josh. And that's why, I tried to showcase and give them some exposure. So, okay.
It's funny that you mentioned that too, though, because like it's the ones that you miss on, and it's I mean, think about. I mean, let's be real. How often do you think Don Sweeney thinks about what he could have done in 2015 if he didn't overlook players based on certain aspects and attributes? I mean, Will Moore fell to the second round. 50 other teams passed on him, and yet when you look at his talent, the talent is there. That I mean, there's potential that he could be as good as any other center in the draft, and if that ends up being the case, 50 teams are going to sit there and say, why did we pass on him? What did we miss? And really what it comes down to, I mean, the big knock on him has been, mostly attitude based. And if you see kind of where he's at with the national development team, and you're watching him in person, and you see a coach, who may be more, and this is just more of a hypothetical situation using him as an example, but if you see a coach who's more berating every little thing that they do wrong versus, coaching them up. Obviously, we all know there's a difference between the two. As a player, you're going to have a completely different attitude versus if the coach is helping lift and get more out of you, as opposed to you screwed this up, you screwed that up. And so by watching those types of things in person, those little things are hopefully going to fall through the cracks less frequently. And that's why Boston took him at 51, because they felt, the knock on him is something we can work around. Fabian Liesel is another one. That quote unquote attitude problems. Can we develop him as a person and let the hockey do the rest? Those are some of the ones that we hear about a lot. But Christian Konstaditsky is another one in the Bruins organization. He couldn't skate worth a lick, but give it enough time, investment, and player desire, can he skate well enough to do anything else at the NHL level?
So Cole Baudouin, I saw him here in the top prospects game. So in my report, my last line of the report for neutral zone, I'm supposed to give them a letter grade or letter ranking. So my last line, as far as projection goes, was, and I can talk about this now because the article and the reports are out, right? But I said a late second round or early third round draft pick based on what I saw in one game. The kid was drafted in the first round, right? So, you can go down each draft and say, oh, and then go back, and all these people that do like redrafts and stuff. Obviously 2015 for the Bruins, it's a tough situation, tough look. But what happens if Zaboral doesn't get hurt? What happens? Jake DeBrusk, pretty usable player. Why was Marchand a third round pick?
Yeah.
Why is Bergeron selected where he was? Right. So Kenny and Chris, you always have those variables, but it's the intangibles. And this is one thing that you'll never, if you don't interview the player or get to know the player, is what's inside of them. Right. The give a shit factor. You can't, or how much they're willing to put into it, and if they care. You don't necessarily see that. Sure, you see it sometimes, but and that's where, oh well, that guy's so skilled. Well, yeah, he's skilled at 18, but does it translate? And that's where your experience comes in, and that's where you have to be, right? And from an NHL scouting standpoint, and this is what makes it so difficult, is would you put your job on the line? And I think we've talked about that before. Like, would you, this is your your pick, your guy, your
Yep.
job's on the line. Would you pick this player in the 6th round? And if you don't get it right, or in the 3rd round, or in the 2nd round, right? Now I know scouting staffs, there's crossover, there's all this stuff, right? And then the head scout and the GM makes their decision. But if that's your guy and that player doesn't pan out, then you're in a tough situation.
Yeah.
And
And
your job, and that's your livelihood is on the line. So, right, that's where your experience comes in. And I know it's difficult to look at that way, but that's the reality of it.
think about being one of the 204 people who passed on Henrik Lundqvist.
Well, and again, there's stories.
Obviously, position plays a part of it. Goaltenders don't tend to be drafted as high, but in general, I mean, he was picked 205. Like that just tells you.
Marc-Andre Fleury played, like I actually worked with the Q Scout. He was in Q Central. Just a great guy. He's the guy that drafted Marc-Andre Fleury to Cape Breton.
There you go.
And the testicular fortitude that it took to draft Fleury at that time. He was just a scrawny kid that might have not played at the highest level.
Well, I'd say that one worked out.
Well, but from a midget standpoint, right? He might have been playing at this tier when. So you put yourself out there sometimes, and sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. But I think consistency and the experience that you have play a major factor in how you evaluate, how you assess a player, and how you project a player.
Absolutely. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I know we're getting closer to the 2nd hour mark, so I do want to wind it down. But again, we could keep going all night, all day, and just never stop. It's always fun to have you on, Craig. Thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts for viewers of today's episode? Anything that you want to plug before we sign off for the night here?
Well, I just want to thank you both for having me on. I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate Dom chiming in on the comments. I hope all is well with Dom and his family and all of your families. I know everyone's looking forward to and really excited about the upcoming season. I think it's imperative that we all put things in perspective at times, and really zero in on what's important, and not necessarily get caught up on the game as much as we might feel. As of right now, from my standpoint, from a neutral zone standpoint, I'm not sure. We haven't been told anything about the upcoming season as of yet. So there's still discussions going on. So I hope I'm back with neutral zone. And if I am, you can tap into that platform to see my reports and some of the articles that I hope to write. If I have my own platform as well, First Down Sports Podcast. I know it's a football connotation to it, but so I was invited on that platform to write by two people that have been really supportive of my path, and you can just follow me at Eags37. But I look forward to to the season ahead. And I also look forward to our further discussions here. And, I just hope that the game is trending in the right way and that people are mindful about putting things out on social media when it comes to player evaluations and projections and that type of thing. That I just hope that Everyone chooses their words very, very carefully. I will say this one thing: I don't like naming players, but if you want to watch a very good two-way defenseman, watch a lot of the Quebec Remparts this year and Charlie Morrison. That's one name to remember. So there you go.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
That was one of the questions that I kind of left off was one player to keep our eyes on this season. So, Kenny, do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up episode 2 here on the Next Shift Pod?
No, it was a great episode, Craig. Thank you again for answering all my questions. I feel like every time you come on, I'm like I got to fire on all cylinders here. I mean, you don't get the opportunity to talk to somebody like you all the time, and I'm glad that I'm able to ask you these questions. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Kenny. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who tuned in live, Dom, and taking part in the comments. And Kenny and I will be back here next week. We'll have another kind of preview, one more, I think, to kind of get through here. But hockey season will be here before we all know it. So I'm looking forward to it. And Craig, definitely look forward to having you on during the season. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see everyone next week.